If you flip the meaning of the word here to loss mitigation in terms of mitigating the loss of the property or time or holding costs, etc., I think it creates a different reality.
The Weekly Friedman, your source for the most essential information in the default industry, with your host, Adam Friedman.
In the default industry, it's common that loss mitigation for business purpose loans is treated the same way as loss mitigation for conventional residential mortgages. The reality is that the borrowers, the assets, and the options are different. Today, I'm joined by Michael Chisholm to discuss how lenders and servicers should evaluate business purpose loss mitigation differently from that of regular conventional mortgage loans. When loss mitigation comes up as a topic, I think the normal inclination is to think about a homeowner who fell behind in their mortgage. In business purpose loans, it's different. We're not dealing with a homeowner. We're dealing with a company or a fix and flipper. Why does that matter? Why is that something that a servicer, an attorney, and a lender, why should they think about that reality?
You have the two kind of dichotomies of BPLs. In one sense, they are not required to be evaluated for any loss terms that are generally offered to a single family homeowner in a traditional mortgage. And so sometimes, servicers discount loss mit for BPLs to a certain extent. If you flip the meaning of the word here to loss mitigation in terms of mitigating the loss of the property or time or holding costs, etc., I think it creates a different reality. When we're thinking in terms not of necessarily traditional loss mit programs, you're not going to do, a plan or necessarily a modification in most cases. But there's other avenues to loss mitigation that can keep the borrower current or in a place moving forward towards resolution that might be different. And these tend to have to do with the type of loan that the BPL is as well. Fix and flip, you might be talking about different cash draw situations, trying to prioritize the improvement of the property before you want to recover the property, or if you ever want to recover the property. And loss mit also means often stronger settlement terms in litigation in our sense for the purpose of this conversation. So the other reality here too is we talk about BPLs as if they are amorphous and everything is an LLC or, a company that's doing a fix and flip. There's a term sophisticated borrower or sophisticated LLC sometimes. Point is, not all of the people who get an LLC and a fix and flip loan are CEOs and experienced investors. And so often people are looking for ways out and they don't fully understand the picture before them. And there might be a good resolution to all parties if this is more closely evaluated.
So what do you do? A servicer says, hey, I have a business purpose loan that's in default and we want to investigate loss mitigation. How do you determine the best outcome or propose an outcome?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to be very careful with your teams, right? You're not going to be offering the same terms. You're not looking for probably, reinstatement on BPLs. So being careful in how you're evaluating for loss mitigation, but not closing the door on it. So while you might not be offering reinstatement plans, you might be offering some type of payment plan to get them back into a situation where the property can be reinstated. You might be looking at short payoffs is common. Deeds in lieu, very common. So you're going to be looking at probably whole asset recovery rather than reperformance in the plan. If you are looking at non-monetary defaults, which is a whole other topic and complication, if it has to do with, delinquency in the improvement of the property or in cost overages or even in use of the property, you may be looking at different avenues of getting them to a place where you can move forward with the recovery of the asset in terms that are viable for both parties.
When you're thinking about a homeowner in a conventional loan, the first thing you're trying to figure out is what do you earn? And one thing I always think about is what are the taxes? Because the difference in those two is kind of the spread you have to play with. I think when you're thinking about business purpose loans, similarly to how you would think about a homeowner of a conventional loan who does not want to retain the property, you're kind of starting with what's the property value. If you have a business purpose loan with a ton of equity, the choice is kind of clear. Go sell the house, right? But you might have a regular homeowner with a lot of equity who wants to keep their house because they live there. Their kids go to school. You really have to start from the beginning. A business purpose borrower may still want a loan mod. It just might not make any sense for the client.
The reality too is the property condition, the number of properties that are, potentially cross-collateralized and their value. And if you know that this borrower has other assets, whether they are with the lender or the holder of the note in question or with others. We've seen this before with people who have large portfolios, and you need to start pressuring them to evaluate where they can come up with equity or money to bring to the table through the sale of other properties. The reality is you need a strong partner. Obviously, we're experienced in providing services for BPL to our clients, and you really need somebody who's on your side who can look at this question from all angles. And it's probably not best suited to in-house plan development when you're talking about a late-stage default that's actively been referred to a law firm. Pre-referral, you have to be very careful, but there's questions that you could have your team learn to ask and work with your investors towards figuring out if there is something to prevent late-stage default.
One common thing I hear from servicers is that many firms are not really thinking in this way. They're not thinking about business purpose lending as a whole separate asset class. It needs to be treated differently. And I think your approach and the way you see it is very insightful and very helpful. So I appreciate it. Thank you for joining Michael Chisholm and I in the Weekly Friedman, your source, the most essential information in the default industry. Thanks for tuning in and looking forward to seeing you next time.